The smaller zoo, besides the main dinosaur one, was coming to its end. The finish line could be seen on the horizon. Only a handful of other creatures were still on the conveyor belt, waiting to be presented to the audience and worldwide public. Currently, the scientists were still busy with making the final preparations for some of the prehistoric creatures, and they asked the audience for maybe some suggestions of prehistoric animals that weren't dinosaurs for the scientists to create. And with that, I'm breaking the fourth wall here for a bit. Hey viewers! With how things are going, the next episode will probably be the last one, seeing I only have one more animal to showcase after this episode. So, if you know of any more prehistoric animal mods for Jurassic World Evolution that think will fit this season, then please let me know in the comments below. Over time, this relatively small zoo had grown into a large sprawling attraction park catering to all sorts of visitors. It had fluffy, cute-looking animals, scary and awe-inspiring beasts, creepy crawlers, and majestic giants. All sorts of different flavors, and the news that it would reach its grand and official finished opening pretty soon had everyone excited. But until that time arrived, more animals would need to be brought over. The latest addition was the Gigantopithecus, the giant primate. Roamed the forests of what China used to be and lived a relatively quiet life. Due to its large size of 3 meters, it did not have to fear a lot of predators. Though it could live off of other food types like meats, nuts, and leaves, it mostly relied on fruit to survive, and its sheer size and changing of climate ultimately led to its downfall. It simply was not able to secure enough food for itself, thereby actually having the smaller ones being able to survive and evolution doing the work into making smaller primates like we know today. In many cases, the Darwin theory of survival of the fittest means that the biggest and strongest survive. But in this case, it can also be said that a species can actually become too big to where it cannot sustain its own needs or body. For the look of this Gigantopithecus, the scientists went with something resembling an orangutan, though various art through the years have also portrayed it closer to that of a gorilla. The red hue of its fur shined beautifully in the sun, and even though these were ancient animals, nothing changed in terms of their need to be with other species of their own. They were very social animals in that regard. A few of the scientists showed some concerns with these creatures, as they were of course able to use their motor functions a bit better than most other animals in the park. They could easily grab things like the fence and tear it down, so extra care was being taken on using the behavior prohibitors to make sure things stayed peaceful. But the giant apes posed no threat whatsoever and seemed to love their new habitat. A matriarch took the lead, and the others were often seen following her wherever she went. In contrast to something like a raptor pack, though there was indeed a hierarchy with a clear leader, it wasn't like the leader would not share with others. Everyone could eat and drink at the same time, and the caretakers would be sure to provide them with enough fruit so that history would not repeat itself. The next animal that would be introduced had already seen the light of day in the main dinosaur zoo, and would now also be added here. The Estomanosuchus was still one of the most bizarre looking creatures here. Its name literally meant crowned crocodile due to its unique skull shape, where it seemingly had horns, antlers, or simply pieces of bone sticking outside its head. There have been many discussions and many doubts about whether they were indeed horns or antlers, but for this particular creation, the scientists went with that theory. There are some that mean that this creature resembled more of a modern cow than what we see in most books and other art. The irony too is that were one to look at this particular skull shape, and even teeth, similarities could be found with bears, so still a lot was incomplete and unknown about this specific animal. There have been many incomplete specimens found, so the scientists themselves were also kinda grasping in the dark. The Estomanosuchus was an omnivore, with these species yet again emphasized by its teeth since it had sharp fangs for cutting up and chewing up meat, but also had more flat ones in the back to where it could crush leaves, fruits, and nuts. They could reach a length of 3 meters, but they were a bit more pudgy and short. That actually also made them cute in a weird way, and the audience members who laid their eyes upon these mysterious creatures often did not know what they were looking at exactly. There really wasn't anything like it, yet it shared characteristics with multiple animals at the same time. They were not a species that really migrated a lot, and would often stay with its own herd and graze where they were at. That made them extremely easy to put into a new zone without the panic of them running out of control. They did not pose as much of a threat as some of the other animals in the park, but nevertheless, you would not want to see them cranky. And now with these new additions to the park, it was time for another highlight. Maybe the highlight to many, as the mammoths would finally be added to the park, a staple and assurance that had been coming for several months already. But this time, they would be put into a zone with a different animal, namely the woolly rhino. The two creatures complemented each other, and first the rhinos were brought over. The rhinos still make quite the impression, with their large nose horns demanding respect. The color variation depended on a darker fur or brighter, closely resembling the gray and whiteness we know from modern rhinos today. When these animals were flown over, extreme caution was needed to be made when it came to sedating them and flying them to their new zone. A stampede of these creatures was an ultimate nightmare scenario. The rangers were told to do this as quickly as possible, and even though they succeeded, some of the rhinos did get agitated and even hit one of the cars. No one was hurt, luckily, which was a miracle in and of itself. And so the rhinos were then transported to the new zone and could explore it to their heart's content, since it would still take a while before the mammoths would join them. The area was definitely big enough and had a varied terrain where they could find a spot for their group to feel at ease. And so with the rhinos situated and not going into a full panic attack, green light was given to fly over the majestic mammoths. These giants were still an incredible sight to behold, and that should be noteworthy, seeing as they were one of the first modified creatures to be added to the main dinosaur park, and still, the demand for them to be added here was massive. Five were flown over, and the rangers were told to use the same precautions when it came to sedating them. Chances were more likely that the darts would feel like mosquito bites to these mammoths, but nevertheless they had to be careful. Luckily everything went fine, and they were transported over, creating an impressive image of flying elephants. People were also a bit nervous on how the rhinos, which had time to acclimate to their new home, would react to these new and sudden invaders. It might have been the sound of the helicopters that upset them more, but in general, they accepted the mammoths for what they were. Maybe a single rhino or so could be seen running a bit stressed here or there, but the rhinos could sense that in general, the mammoths had a very passive personality. All they cared about was just slogging around, drinking water, and eating some delicious leaves. And with that, these iconic animals were paired up, and the people loved it. The zone they were put in was massive, but both species were so gigantic that a sight of them was pretty much always guaranteed.